Hello everyone. Let's continue reading 1,000 Broken Pieces by Tillie. Climbing the stairs higher and higher, I didn't stop until I was in the nosebleeds, well out of sight. I sat down on the hard plastic seat and threaded my hands together. Every muscle in my body was tight as my eyes focused on the ice, as I watched my former friends and teammates practicing, making runs, breakaways, and dekes, firing shot after shot at Timpson, the goalie who rarely let anything pass. His nickname wasn't Shadow for nothing. Here, the most familiar voice called, cutting through the arena, and I felt a sharp stab in my stomach. Eriksson powered forward, taking the puck, and soared up the ice. With a perfectly aimed shot, it sailed into the net, lighting up the lamp. I used to be right there beside him. My leg bounced in agitation, and I fought to not inhale the freshness of the ice, to feel the sharpness of the cold air filling the arena. I pulled off my beanie and ran my hand through my dark hair. The tattoos on the backs of my hands stood out against my paler skin. Tattoos. So many tattoos and piercings now covered my body, just about erasing any sign of the person I was before. I closed my eyes when the sound of warring hockey sticks and boards being slammed into began to instigate a migraine from hell. Jumping to my feet, I pounded down the stairs toward the side door. I had just made it to the hallway when I heard Woods. I froze mid-step, heard the sound of Eriksson leaving the ice, bladed feet awkwardly running on the hard surface behind me. But I kept moving, I kept going, avoiding my former best friend until a framed jersey mounted on the arena wall stopped me dead in my tracks. Woods 33 stood proudly in the hallway. In memoriam was written on a bronze plaque above it, an individual team picture with his smiling face beaming back at me. It was a punch right to my gut. I hadn't been prepared for it. I had sneaked through. It had struck unannounced. Kale! Eriksson's voice was closer now. I turned my head and saw him approaching, and my heart started to slam against my ribs. The look of hope and excitement on his face almost made my legs give out. Kale, you should have told me you were coming. Steven Eriksson was breathless from trying to catch me. He still held his stick from the practice he'd just run out on, and pulled off his helmet, placing it on the floor by his bladed feet. I just stared at him. I couldn't make myself move. He'd been there with me. He'd seen it all with me. Eriksson's attention flickered to the framed jersey before me, sadness engulfing his expression. Coach had it put up a couple of months back. Said some really nice things about him. You were invited, but... Shivers ran up my spine, causing every inch of skin on my body to break out in goosebumps. I could see Steven studying how I looked now. See him looking at my tattooed hands and chest and neck. See him tracking my pierced nose and bottom lip, the black gauges in my ears. I've been trying to get a hold of you, man, he said, trying to edge closer. He gestured to the direction of the ice. For months. We miss you. He took a deep breath. I miss you. It's not the same without you, brother. Brother. That word was like a machete slicing my chest, splitting me where I stood. Feeling the familiar fire melt the ice that had built in me the minute I stepped into this arena, I spat. I'm not your brother. Then looking at the framed jersey that hovered like an omen beside me, I slammed my fist right into the center of the navy blue number 33. I felt the broken glass dig into my knuckles, and the warmth of my blood hit my skin as it began to drip down to my wrist. Jesus, Woods, stop, Steven shouted. But I was already pushing out of the exit door and into the darkening winter evening. I ran across the lot, lungs burning, and jumped into my car, ignoring Steven trying to signal me down from the side door. What the hell had I been thinking, coming here? I skidded out of the parking lot, trying to stop my hands from shaking. That framed jersey, why did they have to do that? Why did I have to see that? I drove and drove, pushing the speed limit, but I couldn't stop my hands from shaking. Was this what he'd felt like when he'd roared down the road? When he'd done what he did? My blood trickled down my arm. My knuckles were split open, wounds raw. But worse, I could smell blood. Blood. The coppery scent immediately yanked me back to the moment I prayed I could forget. The one that was as tattooed onto my brain as deeply as the black and red ink on my neck. I felt my breathing stutter, the white puffs of smoke bursting into misery staccato balls before me. My stomach swirled. The fire I held onto like a crutch, extinguishing by the second as that night came tumbling back. I made a harsh right turn onto the dirt road that led to home, but slammed my foot on my brakes halfway up at the pond. I was panting like I'd just run a marathon. I couldn't be in the car. It was too enclosed, too stifling, reminded me too much of that night. Jumping from the driver's seat, I ran to the pond, inky thick ice coating its surface. I stopped at the edge, head tilted back as I stared at the darkening sky. In memoriam, a choked, strangled sound wrenched from my throat. I bent down, palms flattening on the ice. Anything to ground me. Christ, how did we even get here? How had it all gone so wrong? Why hadn't he said anything? Why hadn't he just talked to me? Throwing my head back, I screamed into the night sky. Hearing sleeping birds fleeing from the surrounding trees, I slowly stood, throat raw, body jumping with adrenaline, and moved to the shed that I hadn't opened in I didn't know how long. Placing my bloodied hand on the handle, I wrenched it open and found my old skates staring back at me. I ignored the punch to the gut I received when I saw the second pair leaning beside them. Grabbing mine, I kicked out my boots, not caring if my socks were soaked through as they slapped on the snow. I slipped them on and felt nauseous as that familiar rush of rightness took me in its hold. I glanced up at the sticks that stared back at me like they had a soul, like they had memories that lay trapped in the layers of wood. Before I could overthink it, I grabbed for the one with black and gold tape, Bruins colors. As I held it, it felt sacrilegious. I never believed I deserved to hold this stick. How could I when it belonged to my hero? The one who taught me everything I knew. The one I looked up to, emulated, laughed with, and run to. The one who shone so bright he lit up the whole friggin' sky. Now I was permanently stuck under his eclipse. Instinctively, moving to the pond, I placed my right blade on the ice and pushed off until I was gliding along the surface. The harsh wind slapped at my face. My lungs, which felt like they'd forgotten how to function, drank in a long gasp of air. The tip of the stick in my hands dragged across the pond's frozen surface. I tapped it back and forth like I was passing a puck in between. It came as natural to me as breathing. This ice hockey. I closed my eyes as I circled the pond, and like I had slipped into another plane, I heard the distant echo of two kids laughing. "You think you can take me, kid?" Cillian's deep voice rang out over the snow and wind as I ran toward him, stealing the puck from under him. "Hey!" he laughed, and chased me down the pond at what felt like 1,000,000 miles an hour. These days, he couldn't catch me. When I slipped it through the two branches that made up our makeshift goal, he wrapped his arms around me, swooping me out the ice. "You're better than me now, kid." "How the hell did that happen?" The smile on my face was so wide my cheeks ached. I shrugged. "You knew that, right?" Cillian said, releasing me and circling where I stood. "You're gonna go all the way. Everyone sees it. All eyes are on you." I didn't see it. Sil was the best hockey player I'd ever seen. I was pretty sure I would never measure up. He was older than me and was the star of every team he'd ever been on. Ever since I could remember, I wanted to be just like him. "It's in the stars, kid," he said, roughing at my messy hair with his gloved hand. "We'll play at Harvard together, then hit the big time. NHL, All-Stars, Olympics." He smiled and pressed a kiss to my head. "Together, yeah?" "Together," I replied, feeling like the luckiest kid in the world, me and Cillian. Together, the two of us could conquer the world. A sinking feeling pressed onto my shoulders. A 10-ton weight pushed me down into the ground. I opened my eyes only to find myself standing in the dark, in the middle of our neglected and abandoned pond, alone. No future we dreamed of waiting before us. No woods brothers conquering the world, just me and the specter of my brother hovering over me like a vacuum, sucking anything good and light into its ravenous void. The wood of the hockey stick groaned in my hand as my fingers wrapped around it like a vice. The longer I stood there, immobile, fury filled the emptiness in my soul and built until I lifted that stick high and slammed it down into the ice with every bit of strength I could obtain, shattering and splintering it into 1,000 broken pieces. Our dreams were shattered now too, so what was one more casualty in the shit show of a situation? Pushing back out of the ice, I shucked out my skates, kicking them into the mass of overgrown, leafless trees surrounding me, and slumped back to the ground. You're going, kid. Dad may have well been behind me as for how loud his voice was in my head. I was 18 and about to go on a trip around the world with others apparently like me. I was 18 and should be working toward the future I dreamed of, but the one I had been promised had been stolen from me by the one I loved most, the one I trusted most in this world. Nothing else mattered anymore. I was completely alone. And for sure, for such a long time now, I hadn't even found it within myself to care. Timid Hearts and First Sights, Savannah, New York. Are you all packed? I looked up from where I was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, lost in thought. Ida stood before me, her long dark hair down in soft waves and dimpled smile on her pretty face. Mama and Daddy had brought me to New York to catch the flight to our first stop on a therapy trip. We were to meet in the airport, where I would meet the rest of the kids going, and our 2 therapists, of course. I had video called with the therapist a few times, and they seemed nice. It didn't take my nerves away, though. Ida had refused to stay behind in Georgia, insisting on coming to see me off. I pressed my hand over my closed suitcase. I think so. Ida had shared a room with me last night. She'd regaled me with stories from school and the latest gossip from the cheer squad she was a part of. If sunshine was personified, it was Ida Litchfield. Ida dropped beside me on the bed and threaded her hand through mine. I stared at our intertwined fingers, her bright pink polish next to my clear. Ida placed her head on my shoulder, and just that simple act of sisterly affection brought a lump to my throat. I don't want to go, I confessed in a whisper, feeling the fluttering in my heart that ignited the anxiety I knew was preparing to strike. Ida squeezed my hand. I know. She trailed off, and I knew she had stopped herself from saying more. I waited, unsure if I wanted to hear it, but then, with a shaky inhale, she said, "But I need you to." The sudden sadness in her tone was a knife straight through the heart. I stilled at her confession and turned my head to look at her. She kept her face down, head tucked into the curve of my neck. "Ida, please," she said, quietly begging, then slowly raised her head. It gutted me to see her usually happy eyes crushed with sadness. A sheen of tears washed over her green irises. My heart began to race. Ida glanced at the window showcasing JFK Airport, then looked back to me. "I need my sister back," she finally said, and I felt that knife slice even deeper. I wanted to say something, but guilt infused my cells, make it impossible. Losing Pops, Ida trailed off, a lone tear spilling over her left cheek. I dusted it away with my thumb. Ida gave me an echo of a grateful smile. She took a deep breath. Losing Pops was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. I placed my free hand on her knee. I was seeing Mama and Daddy in the aftermath. Seeing you, Ida passed. And I knew she was back there, reliving those first few months after Poppy's death. The darkest days we had ever endured, the aftermath, the knowing that nothing would ever be the same again, seeing what it did to you all. That hurt most of all. My family, my perfect, beautiful family was irreparably hurt, and I couldn't do anything to make it better. Mama and Daddy were crumbling. Poppy, our perfect Poppy, had gone, and I missed her so much I couldn't breathe, but I'd cut herself off. I tugged her closer. What? Please, tell me. Ida shifted and looked me in the eyes, but I knew I had you. I wanted to cling to you, Savannah, to be sure you didn't leave me too. My breathing stuttered. I was so young when it all happened, old enough to remember it all, but too young that it must have been almost impossible to process in her grief. I used to sneak into your room at night, just to be sure you were breathing. I didn't know. Ida. I held on to the fact that although Poppy was gone, I knew she was in a better place. I could just feel it, in my heart. After all those years in pain, fighting to live, she shook her head. I can't explain how, I just knew she was watching over us. Whenever I thought of her, I felt a subtle kind of warmth wrap around me that I can't even describe. At times in our house, I felt her presence, like she was walking right beside me, sitting on the couch next to me. She laughed in a self-deprecating way. It brought me so much comfort, still does. It probably sounds silly. It doesn't, I said reassuringly. In fact, in the beginning, I'd prayed for that too. I had asked Poppy for a sign so many times and nothing had ever come. I just wanted to know she was okay, that her life hadn't truly ended, that she was somewhere better than this world, laughing and loving, maybe reunited with our mama, who she adored so much, that she still loved us and was around us, helping us cope with her irreparable loss. But the thing I found harder since we lost Poppy, I held my breath, waiting for what she would say. Ida's shoulders dropped and she whispered, "It was that awful day. I lost you too." Whatever had been left of my heart was obliterated, Ida's words having the effect of a grenade. Ida's hand became a death grip around mine. I watched you fade, Sav. I watched you turn so into yourself that you became impenetrable. You built walls around your heart so high that no one could breach them. 2 more tears fell down her face, not even me. You locked us all out. Ida exhaled a long, slow breath. Just under 4 years ago, I lost 2 sisters, and her voice caught and it destroyed me. She cleared her throat and rasped, "I just really, really want you back." The pain in her voice made me feel nauseous, because she was right, wasn't she? I had pushed everyone out. I'd let my little sister suffer, and I'd done nothing to help her. But it wasn't on purpose. The walls had built themselves without my direction and trapped me deep inside, and I let them. I was still there now, but hearing what I was doing to Ida, it took me too many minutes to speak, but on a deep breath I confided, "I don't know how to come back." This time Ida wiped the tears from my cheeks. "I've been trying, Ida, I promise." "I know you have." Ida wrapped her arms around me. The moment she did, my racing heart calmed to touch. "I'm so proud of you for how much you've tried, but I need you to go on this trip, not just for me, and not just for Poppy, but for you." Ida pulled back and cupped my cheeks. There was so much love and encouragement in her eyes. "You deserve to live, Sav. You are so loved and so special, so smart and beautiful and kind, and you deserve to be happy." Ida's throat became clogged again. "That's all I want for you, happiness. Pops would want that for you too." I stared at my sister and fought against the voice inside my head telling me to resist, that I didn't need to go, that I was fine, that I just needed more time. More therapy with Rob back at home. Therapy that I had been having for years, that hadn't worked because nothing was working. "Okay," I said, betraying the fear inside of me, and held on to my sister tighter. Poppy had always been my older sister, the one I went for everything, but I was Ida's older sister now, the one she should be able to go to confide and trust in. So I had to try. For her, I would try. That's it for this video. I hope to see you again in the next video. But for now, bye.